We're going to talk about StarCraft today. It's one of my favorite games, but it's a game that I think is a pretty big problem, and not a lot of people play it anymore. And so, anyway, let's see if maybe we can fix that. And I think it has to do with the fundamental rule of StarCraft, actually. Um, this is a rule that FilterSC mentioned in a video a while back, and I think he's right. I think it's spot on. And the rule basically says that the most important thing in StarCraft, what players need to focus on is how much they can make, right? Because that's the most important thing. And then secondly, connected with that is, well, how effective can you use what you make or build? And everything else, doesn't really matter because those things are so much more important. And I think that's a problem because that part of the game is pretty mundane, and it's actually very stressful too. It forces you to click buttons at certain intervals and be very crisp with these things. So it's not accessible to new players at all. So I think in order to fix StarCraft, you have to change that rule. You have to make core changes that will change the rules so that the focus is on something else. And that focus should be, more interesting aspects of the game, which are like countering unit builds, map control, effectively using your units, drops, exploring, those kinds of things. And you still, how much you can make should be a factor, but it should be at the bottom of the list instead of the top. And I think if we can do that, I think the game will be a lot better. So how do we do that? I think there's two ways. And so one is changing some of the macro econ related aspects of the game and revamping the UI. And I really think that both need to be done together. So the first is auto build workers, right? So SCV drone probe, you just set it to autocast and you drop and expand, it'll build. You don't have to worry about it. It'll just pull the 50 minerals and be done with it. The second is that workers get their own unique supply pool. So what I mean by that is this. Right now, every unit in the game shares the 200 supply pool, and you have to build, depots or overlords or pylons. What if instead your worker class unit had its own pool that's fixed at 90? You can't, change it, but you don't need supply depots. And so what that will do is a couple of things. One, it'll allow for larger armies, but two, it means if a player is supply blocked, they don't get punished twice by the game. Because right now, if you're supply blocked, not only is unit production stopped in your army and things, but because your SCV production is stopped, your econ gather rate, is now behind your opponents. So it's just, the game is not very forgiving. So, okay, the third thing would be stronger buildings. So increase, the health of the armor of all the buildings in the game. This, you'd certainly have to play test to figure out what works. But I think what that would let you do is make defensive static structures a little bit more valuable. It would make map positions more valuable and make map design more interesting. So then with the UI, there are a couple of things, and I'll go through it here in a bit, but we want to improve unit selection, and then we want global access to a lot of our macro aspects of the game. So that's building new buildings, training new units from buildings we have, and researching new things, and just making that easier to reach all that. All right, so real quick, just want to go through this mock-up. So this you can see is kind of an example what I have for the redesign of the game. So a couple of things. The map is bigger. All your macro elements are next to each other. Your resources are right by the map, so it's easy to see. There's that split supply I was talking about. We have a lot of units selected, and we aggregate the abilities across those units. The hotkeys and everything, it's front and center. The idea is using the QWERTY, the QWER, ASDF, 2 rows of the keyboard, more like a HOTS interface. This is very inspired by Heroes of the Storm. Here we have better instant knowledge about what we have selected. We know we have 10 Marines, 1 Marauder, 1 Widowmine, 2 Hellions. We know which abilities those units use. We still see that it's a biological unit, the armor, that kind of thing. So it just displays a lot more information. We could see more of the screen, takes up less space. And so a cool thing, if you press the tab key, if you use the mouse wheel, you can actually scroll up and down and cycle through the individual units. Kind of like what you would in the current game, but now it gives you a sense of space. So you're not, like going in circles. You can find what you need. Here, this little menu, if we change the selection, this is how we access these global menus. So the bottom one is contextual to what we're currently selected. But the middle one is always going to give us all of our production. And so we can quickly build units. We can switch to other production tabs. These control groups are made for us and they're automatically updated when we build new buildings. You can do your research. And then if you go up here, you can actually build buildings. Same kind of thing. This will pull the nearest SCV that's not doing anything, and it will build one of these buildings where we want it. It'll favor idle workers, but it could take mineral guys. Gas miners would be the last resort. Now we have an SCV in our army. You could probably change the option if you want that to be included, but maybe you don't, right? Because the SCV is doing repairs or something. And of course, shift is a quick modifier, then we can get to the advanced buildings. And so all these hotkeys persist, kind of like the grid layout. I think this will help new players, just like with Here's a Storm, understand how to use the hotkeys. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I go into more detail on another video. If you're interested more, then check that one out. Thanks.